Today, inside the shaky ceasefire deal between the U.S. and Iran.
Iran says a framework deal with the United States currently exists, but it does not include the nuclear issue, nor does it cover management of the Strait of Hormuz, which Tehran has insisted that it has the right to oversee.
Did U.S. officials this weekend oversell progress in talks between the two countries? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode. Do you think peace is on the horizon? Do you think there's a possibility that the Strait of Hormuz opens shortly? And remember, if you're on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review and a 5-star rating. It really does help the show.
I'm Ali Hashem. I'm a reporter with Al Jazeera. I covered the latest war in Iran. I've been covering Iran, the region, for the past couple of decades.
Okay. Well, Ali, you set off a bit of a firestorm, political firestorm this weekend, and I just want to run through the timeline of events with you. You are reporting on air some of the details of a draft memorandum of understanding, an MOU between the U.S. and Iran that would end hostilities and set up this roadmap for further nuclear talks. President Donald Trump posts that a deal had been largely negotiated.
Donald Trump says he had a very good call with regional and Gulf leaders, including a separate call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He also says a memorandum of understanding pertaining to peace, in capital letters, was also discussed.
Which triggered a huge backlash in all the places you might expect. U.S. Senator Ted Cruz said he was deeply concerned. Roger Wicker, who's chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, called parts of the deal you reported a disaster. Criticism got so bad that on Sunday, Trump kind of changed his tune from saying it was largely negotiated. Suddenly, he's saying things like the negotiations are still ongoing, the MOU not yet fully finalized.
In a post on Truth Social on Sunday, Trump said a U.S. naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz will stay in place until a formal agreement is reached and signed, adding both sides must take their time and get it right.
And argued that his critics don't know what they are talking about. Now, his critics might not know what they're talking about, but you seem to. So from a reporting standpoint, how is it that you know so much about the details of this deal?
Well, I've been covering Iran for the past, as I said, couple of decades. I have a lot of sources inside Iran. I've been covering from inside Iran. You know, I just came from Iran days ago. So given the fact I have my sources and I'm capable of knowing what kind of sources I can believe or not believe, I was able to get these points and report them on Al Jazeera.
So, Ali, that's why we're very excited to have you here to talk about what's in this proposed agreement. And I guess in broad strokes, the deal aims to extend the ceasefire, open the Strait of Hormuz, and then kind of punt on the tougher negotiations around nuclear and sanctions to the future.
On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said a deal was still being worked out.
We're still a work in progress. As I said, so we have what I think is a pretty solid thing on the table in terms of their ability to open up the straits, get the straits open, enter into a very real, significant, time-limited negotiation on the nuclear matters.
Trump administration officials say the deal has a possible 60-day window to finalize terms.
But the core of it really feels like a one-for-one trade. Open the strait, end the blockade. And this is what I want to start with. Can you talk about how the U.S. naval blockade changed the fundamental dynamic inside Iran and helped make a deal like this possible?
Well, I think the whole picture is very complicated when it comes to the Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz, where I think is the problem, the real problem, the central problem. And then comes the U.S. blockade, the naval blockade of the Iranian blockade. So the fact that these two issues add pressure on each side. So, for example, the blockade, the American blockade on the Iranian blockade did not result in Iran opening the strait.
Uh-huh.
The problem is that now what we are facing as a whole region is the threat of the war returning, the return of the war. And I think this is the main trigger behind all sides seeking in a way to sit on the table, because it doesn't seem yet that both sides are capable of reaching a deal. The gaps are big, regardless of what's being said. Actually, when I saw the draft, I didn't have the feeling, and actually I tweeted later that there is a very big possibility this cannot hold, because it's just like the snake and ladder game. So you advance and then there's something happening and then there's a collapse. So, and this is what's happening. And there are a lot of strings attached to this conflict. So it's not only about Iran and the United States. It's about Israel. It's about the Gulf countries. It's about Hezbollah. It's about China. It's about the global economy. So, I mean, you just call it. It's related to everything. And this is becoming very centric, not regionally only, but also on the global layer. There is no potential right now for a real deal. There is a potential for talks, and they can talk from now till next year. But the basics, the common ground is missing. They are talking two different languages. The Iranians are talking in a way, the Americans are talking in a way. The United States President Donald Trump wants the Iranians to surrender. The Iranians won't surrender.
On Sunday, Mohsen Rezai, a military advisor to the country's supreme leader, warned against further U.S. attacks on the strategic waterway.
About negotiation, the Islamic Republic has put the least costly path before you. The Islamic Republic is telling you that if you continue the war, we will make the American people miserable and the American economy miserable. Iran is here for a fair negotiation with you.
ایران آمده منصفانه برای حقوق خودش با شما مذاکره میکنه.
Security is important to us. Managing the Strait of Hormuz is our legal right.
If it's going to be for them to choose between war and surrender, I'm quite sure that we're going to see another war in the region. So this is why we are in a situation, and everyone is telling the Iranians, you have to give President Trump a win. But the issue is that the Iranians also want a kind of a face-saving exit. And the problem is that both sides isn't, giving the other side the possibility to get out of this conflict with a face-saving situation, maybe because it is too much advanced in the amount of escalation that no side can really divide this whole conflict to two.
I suppose why I bring up the blockade is it seems like both sides have one thing that they want done immediately, that the strait wants to be opened by the Americans and the rest of the world, and the Iranians would like the blockade lifted so they can start moving oil and start getting their economy going again. It seems like they want to have that happen, and then all the stuff that is impossible to agree on, they'll just push it off into the future.
Well, the problem is that the Iranians haven't been selling their own oil for years. Now, yes, they've been smuggling, they've been selling in different ways, but officially, they've not been selling their own oil for the past years because of the sanctions. They've been under sanctions for years, especially after President Trump's exit from the nuclear deal in 2018. So they were under more and more sanctions, and then came the maximum pressure campaign. And yes, they know also at the same time that their own blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is creating a global economic pressure. So the idea right now is that are the Iranians and the Americans in a situation where both sides is waiting the other side to blink first? I think, yes, we are in such a situation. And yes, probably both sides is seeing how to get more concessions and get more leverage. The Iranians know very well that they have a new leverage, which is, if we are to describe it, the Strait of Hormuz is an economic nuclear bomb.
Yes,
and it's putting a lot of pressure on the whole world. It's not a pressure on the Gulf countries only. It's not a pressure on Donald Trump only. It's on even on their allies, on China. It's on Africa. It's on Europe. It's on everyone in this world. And I think the Iranians want to push this to the maximum so that the world will rush to ask them to give a deal for less concessions. I think this is the plan right now.
Yes, but there is a timing aspect of it. They've used the weapon, but is there an awareness in Iran that the longer you keep the strait closed, the weaker that leverage becomes because people are going to find workarounds. The Gulf states are going to find a way to sell their energy one way or another.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure that the Iranians aren't in the best position. They are already squeezed into the corner. But and I think this is something also the government in Iran knows very well, but the establishment, because in Iran you have two parallel bodies. You have the government and you have the establishment. The ideological establishment, the one led by the supreme leader, what they call the Nizam. So this system is the one who takes the big decisions. The government runs the day-to-day business. So the government knows very well that there is a huge impact. Economy is in a very dire situation, or they were already in a dire situation. So now what's happening is just adding to the situation. The Israeli-American war on Iran, according to government numbers, led to around $270 billion in losses. Add to that factories that were destroyed, add to that people that are not working. There's at least 1 million people unemployed now on the streets. So this is all adding. But the problem is that on the other side, the Iranian establishment sees this conflict, this war, as an existential war. Mm-hmm. So they're ready to put any kind of sacrifices in order to continue existing the way they are, with leverage, imposing a new rules and a new status quo in the region, one that was lost after the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel and later on the war by Israel. So the result, the aftermath of that war was changing the status quo in the region, and the Iranian influence degraded and, in a way contained Iran's allies in Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Syria. So what Iran is currently in is a war that was imposed on it by the United States and Israel. Uh-huh. However, it's trying to use this war for its benefit, to change the status quo in the region and to add more pressure on the allies of the United States, i.e. mainly also Israel.
There's a lot of details in this MOU, in this stuff that you've reported. But I think I want to ask you about these security guarantees, because you mentioned that this is existential for the Iranians. And I think from the start, this has been a major concern, especially after the 12-day war of June 2025. How can you blame them? Iran wants to make sure that in 6 months' time, Israel or the USA doesn't just decide to bomb them again. With that in mind, what role are other countries in the region playing in helping to get some of these security guarantees for Iran?
Well, for now, it doesn't seem that there are any security guarantees that are going to be given to Iran. The United States doesn't want to give any guarantees for now. They want to keep this situation in a ceasefire situation, extended ceasefire, till the end of 30 days or 60 days, whereas Iran and the United States can agree on the nuclear issue, they can agree on the other main hurdles, such as the Strait, despite the fact the Iranians are saying they're not going to talk the Strait with the Americans.
There's also reparations for the war damage.
Also, reparations is a two-way thing. So if Iran is going to request reparations, Gulf countries also will request reparations. So it's if we are to put them in the balance, the amount of losses also on the other side, on the Gulf side, was huge. In Qatar, the gas facilities were hit, desalination facilities were hit. In Kuwait, the airport was hit. In United Arab Emirates, several facilities, infrastructure also were hit. So the fact is that this reparation issue is also another hurdle. I don't think that the Gulf countries are ready actually to pay to Iran anything, except if there's going to be a fact-finding commission, which is something that both sides are to study to know who is responsible for what. Also, you have things that were not even mentioned in this whole thing. Iran's ballistic missiles program, which was one of the main issues on the list when the Americans and the Israelis started the war.
Yes, it was.
The other issues are Iran's regional influence. And at the same time, Iran is saying if this war is to finish, then it should finish everywhere. It should finish in Lebanon. And if it's going to finish in Lebanon, will Israel withdraw from Lebanese territories? Israel is already occupying around 600 kilometers of Lebanese territories. Are they going to do that? Actually, is Israel ready to be part of this ceasefire? This is also one of the reasons right now. Actually, we reported that the whole deal is in tatters. It's shaking. It's not in a situation where there's a possibility for it to continue. But it depends on how both sides are going to try to get their allies to also commit. For example, Israel isn't ready to commit to the ceasefire, and it wants freedom of action in Lebanon. So these are all issues that aren't in the paper, by the way.
Yeah.
The big issues, the main concerns, were not mentioned even in the paper. The paper was made just as a bridge from a situation to a situation. But even with all these issues outside the paper could not, the draft could not hold.
Well, it just reminds me of what happened with the Gaza piece. It wasn't a peace plan. It was a ceasefire and a prisoner exchange. And we're just living that forever. So this could just be the deal. But we do have to talk about nuclear because, at the outset of this war, there were many reasons and justifications on the part of the Americans and the Israelis. But as, time has dragged on and victory has become unobtainable, it's really coalesced down to one talking point. And you hear it again and again and again. Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Thursday that they are determined to eventually recover Iran's uranium stockpile, which Washington fears could be used for a nuclear weapon.
No, we get the highly enriched. We will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it.
Tehran says its stockpile is intended purely for peaceful purposes.
This is hugely complicated. It involves high-level discussions regarding uranium enrichment, inspection parameters. The last time they tried to do this during the Obama administration, it took months. In this case, Donald Trump wants to deal with this issue after the 30 to 60-day ceasefire window has closed. How would you see that working out?
It all depends on what they are going to agree on. Because if it's going to be a zero-sum approach, Iran should not have a nuclear program. The facilities should be destroyed, no enrichment. Then it's just the same thing being repeated, deja vu moments. Nothing is going to happen. There is no deal, and that's it. And the Iranians will still have their 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. And the moment there is a decision in Tehran to change the nuclear doctrine from the one that they adopted before, and which was no nuclear bomb, to a new nuclear doctrine that they will adopt, for example, and say we want a nuclear bomb, then the Iranians will have at least they have the material to create 5 to 10 nuclear bombs. This is one thing. So if this is going to extend, who knows what's going to be next? And the more there is going to be pressure, I'm sure that there are going to be more ideas in Iran to create better deterrence. So if there is no deal right now, then I don't know what's going to happen later. But the issue is that Iran is saying they're ready to dilute the 450 kilograms.
Yeah.
President Trump wanted the nuclear material out. President Trump wants the facilities that he already said he arbitrated, the 3 facilities. He said they were destroyed. Now he's saying he wants them destroyed, but he already destroyed them. So how are the Iranians going to destroy a destroyed thing already? So these are issues that are already on the table. Now, the third thing that's also important, that the United States negotiators are asking the Iranians to halt enrichment. First of all, they said forever. Then they said for 20 years.
Yeah.
And the Iranians are saying, well, we can do for 5 years, we can do for 10 years. But still, it's still very loose. This whole discussion is very loose.
Yeah, because it's not going through the UN. It's not going through the EU. It's just a handshake agreement, in Pakistan.
Well, it's not going through real guarantors, yes. But do you think even the UN is capable of implementing anything, or enforcing, any deal? Because, after the JCPOA was signed in 2015, there was a United Nations Security Council resolution that sealed the deal, that said there is a deal, and this deal lifted all the sanctions on Iran. And later on, President Trump decided to leave the deal. So there's nothing that can commit the United States, for example, to stay with the deal. At least this is what we saw in the past. And at the same time, on the other side, on the Iranian side, the Americans are always concerned that even if the Iranians are showing commitment, that they have something else in mind, and there might be a plan B. And this plan B is getting the bomb. So with no confidence, it's a zero confidence situation, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that could either be a good thing, or maybe that makes it easier to make a deal that isn't worth the paper that it's written on. I mean, who knows what the world looks like in 5 years?
And then what's going to happen? I tell you, I'm an individual. And as an individual, I'm not able to plan for the next 15 days.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to take my family for a summer vacation or not. This is just an individual. What about countries? What about countries such as the country we are in right now, like Qatar, that is not producing gas under force majeure, for example, like Kuwait, like Iraq, even Iran? It's all a situation where everything is on pause. And it's not a kind of a comfortable pause.
No.
It's a difficult, very dangerous, very threatening pose that we are going through in this region.
Okay. Well, and finally, in terms of this MOU, let's talk timeline. The White House thinks it could take a few days for an agreement to be approved by the Iranian leadership. That includes the new supreme leader. Is that what you're hearing on your end?
Well, we've been hearing something else because, first of all, there are retreats. The Americans are not standing by the draft. So the point for unfreezing assets seems to be once again on the table. So the Israelis are not ready to abide by the ceasefire, and they want the freedom of action to be on paper. And both points are refused by the Iranians. So it doesn't seem that this is going to be really an easy walk. For now, things are once again in square one.
Well, I mean, I guess then the question is, some of these issues seem unresolvable. This might be more closer aligned to the armistice in Korea. Long term, you'll never really come together. But can there be an interim agreement that opens up the Strait of Hormuz and allows the economy to get flowing again? Because the world really needs that to happen.
Well, for now, I don't see that happening.
Really? Okay. Well, we'll end on
I'm sorry.
End on a sad note there. Well, nobody knows more about this stuff than you, Ali. Thank you for coming on The Take today.
Thank you very much.